Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Honest Hour. Four fantastic realtors here with us today. Talk a little bit about the housing market in BC and across Canada. We've got EJ Bugayong in Richmond, Tyson Kleem in Langley, Norm Hiller in East Van, and Christian B here in Burnaby. And gentlemen, I want to kick things off with a pulse on the market. What are you guys seeing out there, like in your local market? It's kind of a weird market. You read the stats online, they say sales are 30% below where they normally are, have been the last 10 years. At the same time, listings are popping up. What are you experiencing?
I'll quickly start. I find it's all over the map. I mean, in general terms, things have definitely slowed down quite a bit. That's what I've noticed. We are still seeing the odd property here and there in multiple offers. Sometimes it's because they're underpriced because they've already secured a home and they're wanting to sell quickly, and be able to sleep at night. But I find for the most part, it's slowed down quite a bit, but there's still the housing shortage and there always will be. So properties are still moving. Yeah, but it's got to be priced right.
Mm.
Yeah,
EJ?
Yeah. So I completely agree with Norm over there. I think the biggest thing right now is kind of the pricing. You really want to be kind of priced, I wouldn't say aggressively, but definitely close to its market value. There's just a lot more inventory that has kind of come onto the market, and buyers are pretty sensitive to the list price. So, there's lots more to see, and things are still selling, but if your place shows great, it's priced well, it tends to move a lot more quickly than something that's kind of priced a bit higher based on like a couple of years ago with what things were selling for.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a specific example maybe in mind?
Yeah, so I guess, for instance, I think right now I'd a listing over in Guildford over there, and we sold, and then we went to go and buy, and yeah, some of the pricing was based on things that sold a year or two ago, and some of the sellers were basically saying, you know what, we don't want to sell, we want to get this price, and if you're not going to come up in price, we're just going to leave it. Even though there were some other sellers who had sold it based on this current market and there was better data that was more recent, they were like, no, I don't really care what that data is. This is what I want. If you're not wanting to come up that price, we're just going to hold it. And some of those places are 80 days, 90 days on the market, and the seller's like, I'm fine. So the serious sellers are definitely selling, and some other ones are still kind of testing out the market based on what I'm kind of seeing out there.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
I like that sorry, I like that you bring up that point. We can actually use comparables now from 6, 8, 10 months ago versus in a rising market. We can use them for about 2 to 4 weeks, and after that, they're outdated, and sellers will just throw it back at you.
Right. Tyson.
Yeah, no, I agree. It depends on the inventory that's out there because you're seeing more inventory popping up, but the stuff that's priced well or that's a desirable property, you're seeing lots of parties through. I just did an open house this last weekend and had 12 to 13 parties through each day on that one. But as far as sort of serious things, the one thing I'm seeing out here in Fraser Valley is people are writing, but then they're not removing subjects. They're not able to get the financing or there's an inspection. So people are quicker to walk away from a property than they have been before, or it's because they haven't been able to get the financing, which I think is showing the volatility in the financing market right now. And also people probably not doing their due diligence to get a proper pre-approval done. But they're writing on places, tying them up, and then they're falling apart. So I think we've had a number of our listings where somebody's written an offer and they said they're pre-approved, but when they actually come to actually doing their financing with the bank says, sorry, not going to, can't approve you on it.
Tyson, how do you suss that out? That when the buyer comes in through your open house and they say they're interested, they're going to contact their realtor, they're going to write an offer. How do you know that they're really financially qualified?
We get really personal and really invasive. No, we just ask awkward questions. I think we just have to call and talk about have a conversation with their agent and we just get very specific because a lot of times they'll say, yeah, they're pre-approved. They told me they're pre-approved. And the banks will do a conditional pre-approval where they'll look at your income and they'll just do some rough calculations, but they haven't pulled any documents, they haven't pulled your credit. And so the biggest thing is what we do is we say, hey, Have your clients submitted documents? Have they submitted T4s? Has the mortgage broker, have they pulled their credit? And we'll even go to the point of saying, hey, can we get the number of your mortgage broker? Just so we can have a conversation and say, hey, have you ran an actual pre-approval? Because if they haven't ran that, then we go, we're not sure if we feel confident about your client tying up our property, if we don't think the financing is going to go through. And one example is we had one party write over 1.1 million on a detached house, and when it came to their approval, when they got their approval, they said, oh, we're only approved for 1 million. And we said, that's a huge miss. How did you miss that? And so turns out that the mortgage broker actually didn't do a true pre-approval on them.
That's right. And they overestimate their financing, their buying power.
Well, they don't know if they have any loans or anything like that are out there too, right? So that's why they got to pull their credit to see what does that look like.
Sure, sure. Guys, I wanted to get into two topics with you in the time that we have here in about the next 25 minutes. The first one is on renovations, and the second one was on the Smith maneuver. Are you familiar with the Smith maneuver?
Somewhat, yeah. Yeah, it's where you're leveraging to you borrow money to invest, but then you can write off the interest on that. Is that correct? Like that's how.
Yeah, kind of like that. Okay, well, why don't we start with the Smith maneuver first? So this is something a client and a friend of mine brought up recently. We were having dinner and we are going over it. And so I guess the concept is, let's say you take out $1 million mortgage, you're paying down principal every month. Let's say you're paying down $2,000 every month. And then of course, you can take that out as an investment line of credit, right? Because you've paid down that principal. And then you take that 2,000 and you put it in an investment vehicle. Of course, the bank's going to charge you interest on it. They might charge you 4%, let's say. And if you might put that 2,000 into a GIC at 6% or 6.5%. So you're earning a spread on all of these monthly contributions. And over time, of course, you make a little bit of money doing it, but you can also use the spread to pay off your mortgage and your mortgage faster. So this is the basic concept. I hope I'm explaining it right. It sounds too good to be true. I guess my first, again, I'm not an expert on it. Maybe EJ, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've kind of heard about that Smith maneuver before, especially when the market, like 10 years ago or so, when the market, you could actually get some pretty good rental properties that were lower priced and the rent would be decent enough. And people were kind of using that Smith maneuver. But I mean, it's kind of challenging now. If you kind of look at a home equity line of credit, I think some of the rate right now, it's something like 7.2%. So if you're trying to do that Smith maneuver, now you're trying to get an investment that is paying more than 7.2%, which is, that's quite high already. So I think it's just challenging with these kind of rates and with the price point of real estate. Maybe some people who are savvy in regard to stocks can make higher than that 7.2%, but now you're trying to do it and it could be pretty risky, right? 7.2% is pretty good in regards to a return on your money in a year. So to get over that would be, pretty high. So I've heard of it, but I haven't really seen many people using it as of now, based on the current rates.
I think a lot of people are using the equity out of their home after 5, 8, 10 years, right? They've accumulated enough equity. Some of them are taking some of that out and buying an investment property or stocks or what have you. But I don't think a lot of people are doing the true Smith maneuver where you have a readvanceable mortgage and every payment you're taking out and reinvesting that. It's a lot more work. I know a couple of mortgage brokers who do it because, I mean, they're really calculating to the cent here and there and everywhere. But again, the spread's got to be there. If you're only, if you're what you're paying in interest versus what you're getting in an investment, if it's only 1% difference, I mean, is it really worth it? It's not. It's got to be enough of a spread that it makes it worth it. So I think a lot of people are doing well in taking their equity out, but very few people, I believe, I don't know the stats on it, but I don't think a lot of people are doing that on a bi-monthly or monthly basis with a readvanceable mortgage.
Mm.
When it works well, but when it goes south pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, and I think this would work. I mean, I think to your point, if the spread is 1 or 2%, it seems like a hassle. And if you're putting it in something as volatile as stocks, if the market drops 10, 20%, all of a sudden you owe a lot more money,
Yeah.
right? So that would not be a fun, and doing that on your principal residence is maybe not going to be, is going to leave for some sleepless nights.
Here's a perfect example. Someone I know, they have an investment property. When they bought it, it was roughly $5,000 negative cash flow. And I mean, that will improve, but with the interest rates the way they've gone, plus a small special levy on a monthly payment plan, and then the strata fees increased. I mean, the landlord increased the rental amount, but that didn't even cover what the strata fees went up. And now it's about $19,000 negative cash flow. So maybe in that position, it would be better not to do the Smith maneuver, and any equity you have in your personal home, if you needed to float that extra negative cash flow, you can pay that with what you've been paying your house down, right? So I think right now we're probably not going to see a lot of it. Yeah, I think people need to really, if they're going to do that, they need to make sure that they can still make the payments.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are being burned by that right now with the interest rate increases because they increased so fast and they got stuck, right? And so,
Yeah. Because I think several years ago, this may have made sense, a lot more sense anyway, where you were taking that money out on that you're taking the money out at maybe 3.5%, and the market's returning 9%. That's a nice spread. The other way I've heard it pitched to me from a mortgage broker is that when you're putting the money back into a mortgage investment corporation, for example, where you're getting maybe 10, these are private loans, where you're getting 10, 12, 13% return. But I mean, I think people would have to do a lot of research into that mortgage and investment corporation. Any other thoughts on the Smith maneuver?
Yeah, I just kind of want to add to Norm's kind of thought over there is that, yeah, not too many people are kind of doing the Smith maneuver based on the numbers, but a lot of people have been kind of, borrowing from their equity to purchase another property. And I think what the big thing with this current market is that the people who use that equity to buy another property, it really kind of showed how well of a property that they picked, because some of the people who borrowed, for instance, they bought like a pre-sale for like 1.5 and used it on equity. Some of those people are kind of having a hard time because they're like, oh my goodness, I borrowed all this money and I bought this pre-sale and it's still like a luxury condo. They're kind of having a hard time because the rent doesn't make sense at all for those type of numbers versus, I had some clients who purchased property. I actually purchased it as well in an investment property over on the island in Langford. And just based on our numbers, we kind of pulled out some equity and it all kind of made sense. And the numbers fortunately worked even in this kind of transitioning market. But yeah, you really want to be careful when you buy a property using equity that, you have a plan A if everything works out great, but you also have a plan B because if plan B doesn't look great and you're going to put yourself in a tough position, it may not be the right fit when you're using equity like that.
Got it. Okay, let's turn to renovations now. I had a good friend ask me over a beer a month or two ago. He said, if I'm just wanting to do some renovations to add value to my home, what should I focus on? What should I do? And I don't have a background in construction or anything like that. I mean, we all know a good renovation when we see one, right? But it's not. I mean, there's no direct. Like what I'm getting at is you can't say that adding a kitchen, or can you say that doing this to your kitchen adds $50,000 to the value of your home or $100,000? Norm, I know you've got family that have some experience with this, but if a client were asking you, look, there's 2 or 3 things I want to do in my home to really improve the resale value 2 years from now, what do you suggest they do?
It's a really good question. I personally don't like those stats that say, oh, kitchen renovation, you get 143% of your return investment back. It really depends on how your kitchen looks. We're going to be doing a kitchen renovation. Our house is from 1981. Our kitchen looks like it's mid-70s. It's falling apart. It's beyond its life expectancy. Our fridge is rusty on the side because it's been weeping water out the seal. So it's done. We're gonna, whatever we put into it, we're gonna get it out of it. Yeah, we're probably gonna do, nicer than a flip, right? We're doing it for ourselves. I think anytime you're doing a renovation, you really need to ask yourself, what does it look like right now? I have some clients in North Van in a townhouse. They're looking at doing a renovation. I said, your place is from, I don't know what it is, like 2010, 2011. It really doesn't need one. Yes, it will appeal to that, higher class, affluent buyer who's willing to pay for it. But you're also taking out some of the lower end buyers who are trying to stretch themselves into it. Now they can't afford it. And they're not willing to pay that extra money for a kitchen renovation when it's nice enough. So it really depends. What does your home look like right now? Usually paint is almost a guaranteed. I mean, you're going to get your money back. It's going to be easier to sell. Do the paint, right? Paint, good cleanup, curb appeal, things like that. It really depends on what your home looks like. So the rougher it is, the more you can spend on your renovation. I mean, I see this all the time going into properties to flip. If places are so bad that people walk out backwards and don't want to take off their shoes inside, those are the ones that's going to scare everybody off. You're going to get the home. You're not going to be competing usually with 3, 4, 5, 10 other people. And hopefully there's enough profit margin in there to do the renovation, pay your fees, pay the taxes, and actually be able to sell it at a profit, which, it's not really going to happen now with the flipping tax and everything. But if you're looking to buy it and rent it out for a few years and then to sell it, buy something rough and renovate it, or buy something move-in ready. I mean,
Okay.
there's always the option of putting a little bit of money into it to spruce it up to, maximize the rents as well.
Tyson, what do you think?
Yeah, out here in the valley, because there's, it's mostly, or there's a lot of detached. There's also a lot of townhouses out here too. But for our clients who have detached, if their place is able to have a suite, that's usually one of the things we say. Hey, if you can somehow put a suite, if you're looking at 1 to 2 years down the road, Christian, like you're saying or whatnot, if you can manage to put in a suite, it will increase the pool of buyers exponentially in what you can get out here. But that is a bit of a investment. So we just look at it and go, hey, if you're willing to put the investment, we have a few clients who don't want to have to put that work in, and so they say, okay, well, we'll just adjust our price accordingly. But then you're limiting your buyer pool because having a suite there can allow you to qualify for so much more. Yeah, like Norm was saying, paint is good. Although if you have a house that's really rough, it's almost a teardown. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's not gonna do much, I think, there because people can see through it. And you also want to make sure you're not trying to hide things in it as well. But yeah, no, the classic I've heard before is bathrooms and kitchens. If you can somehow do, although those are bigger ticket items, but those typically, I think that the things you gotta look for is will it add value or will it make your place more marketable? Because there's certain things that'll make it more marketable, that'll get more people to look at it, and there'll be less of a gap for them to want. Like they'll go, oh, I can move into this right now, and that will increase how many buyers walk through and go, okay, I can see myself living here. Versus if you're to redo everything, that doesn't necessarily always mean it'll translate to more money in your pocket. It really depends on the product and that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if whether a lot of this has to do with timing. I remember talking to a couple of renovators, and one guy told me, he said, you know what? I may have just bought the thing and just left it empty the last 3 years and then resold it because I was riding one hell of a tailwind
Yeah.
in this market. And I think that was sort of 2017, 18, when the gentleman told me that. And in his view, he said he didn't even think he needed to do renovations, would have just left it empty. But EJ.
Yeah, so I think what Norm kind of mentioned in regards to what you're buying the place for is a big one because, if you kind of overpay for a property and you plan to do renos and you plan to sell in a couple of years, you know, maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense based on what you're paying for the property. But, you know, if you lived in your home for a long time or you're in a slower market and the place has been sitting for a while, you can definitely build some kind of equity in there. I usually kind of tell my clients, you know, if you can get it for a good deal, if you do flooring, a kitchen, the bathroom, but not really taking out the tub, and maybe doing the tub surround with a new tile, just a kind of a quick reno to kind of get the contractors in and get them out, because the longer that they're working on that place or having that plumber in there, the more expensive it gets. And just to get that return on your investment and some more. And it really kind of depends on what people put in. You know, I've seen people do a beautiful renovation and then they've put in like a red backsplash because their favorite color is red. And, you know, and unfortunately it's not what most people want. And some people can be like, you know, I don't want this place, because they're going to, even though it's new, they're going to want to take it out. So you kind of have to kind of appeal to the masses when it comes to renovations, even if it's not what you kind of prefer.
If you're renovating to sell, then I think you have to almost educate yourself. If I'm a homeowner, that this home is no longer mine, so I have to look through it through the lens of somebody who's walking in trying to put themselves in there. And so that's why you can't pick your favorite colors. So like EJ, what you're saying, right? It's you almost got to kind of remove yourself and your emotion, your heart from that if you're looking to renovate because you're going to sell your place in a year or two. And so it changes kind of how you do things.
So and we've all been asked this, when you go into a listing appointment and they ask you, look, what kind of renovation should I do on my place to get it ready for the market a couple of months from now? What would be 2 or 3 items you'd focus the sellers on?
One thing I want to quickly note about kitchens, a lot of people add in all these fancy, well, I shouldn't say a lot. Some people add in all these fancy pull-out pantries and lazy Susans. While some of this stuff is important, some of these pull-out pantries can be $2,500 for the hardware, $3,000 for the hardware. It's very, very pricey stuff. You can do a door with pull-out drawers instead, which is way cheaper. So it's all what type of hardware you're using. It's the stuff that people don't see. Yes, they'll appreciate it, but nobody sees it until they've already bought the home. And it's really hard to market that type of stuff. It's going to be in a video. You're going to have to show it being open and closed. This is the type of stuff that you have to be very careful with. Same thing with appliances. If you're getting medium or low end appliances, they don't last very long anyways. To overspend, I mean, you know, don't go the cheapest, but be cautious of what you're spending your money on. You know, same thing with like dovetail, jointed cabinets and drawers. Like a lot of this, it's thousands of dollars extra on a kitchen. People aren't going to see it. They're not going to appreciate it. Well, I agree with Tyson, don't put lipstick on a pig. You know, you can put very high-end finishings on stuff that people aren't going to notice at all.
And they won't appreciate, right? Like they won't have the same appreciation going like, oh, this is handcrafted cabinetry, because, you know, I sell kitchens for a couple of years and a box is a box, right? As long as it holds up and has structural integrity and it's the face that really matters on it. But yeah, I think the other thing too is you got to understand motivation and also what's your competition out there. We have a client who was listing their townhouse, and their neighbor was listed as well, and so they're going, okay, well, how are we going to, you know, because we would like to sell ours. And so they opted to change out their appliances because their appliances were original, but go for some newer appliances because they said, and then everything will look good to a person walking and they know they won't have to change anything, versus the other place where there'll be a couple things. And so that will give us the edge on the other place when we have a competing scenario. And so I think it's very case by case, but there are a few things you can look at, but I think you got to really depend on, you know, what's around you, what's your motivation, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I've always thought a good deep clean, painting, changing the appliances, and maybe the flooring if it's in a condo. Not pulling up hardwood flooring in a house, but changing the laminate in a condo. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do if you're going to list it. Guys, in the last 5 minutes that we have together, let's turn the page to interest rates. There's a RBC economist named Carrie Freestone that says in the third quarter of 2025, interest rates in Canada will be down by 2% and down by 75 basis points in the United States. And she predicts that here in Canada, the prices will be up 16%. This is in the third quarter of 2025. Would you take the over or under on that 2%?
It's so hard to say, right? Because this year they said the rates were coming down. That's why we had the busy January market, right? Because everybody was front running it, saying, "Oh, the rates are going to come down 5 or 6 times this year," and here we are in almost June, and we don't even know if we're going to get a cut in June. So it's really tough to say. I do know though, I've talked to a lot of people, and although some of the stats say we're doing fine and everything like that, I do feel it's like the everyday person is kind of having a harder time. It may not show in the numbers. So how long they can kind of keep this up with the rates these high is who knows? Who knows? But I definitely have heard people who are kind of struggling with the rates being this high for this long.
Well, and part of this is if, the Bank of Canada is saying that they're expecting a 60% increase in payments when people go to renew their mortgages, which if you take a couple on a $3,500 a month payment, that brings them up to over $5,000 a month. I don't know if this is a topic of a discussion for your clients.
With regards to the interest rate dropping, that question that you had, I'll believe it when I see it. That's all I really have to say about that. I think that's a very generous reduction. I don't quite see that happening, but I think people need to just, number one thing, ensure you can make your payments. Don't buy speculating that rates are going to go down. They've promised that, and here we are, right? I'll believe it when I see it.
Tyson.
Yeah, 2%, that's a lot in that amount of time. Although they do say historically that when they do drop rates, they drop them pretty fast, but it has to be a pretty recessionary environment. And I think with the amount of immigration that we have, like you're saying, right, immigration actually is record high even this year compared to last year. Like I think they're saying it's roughly around 100,000 people a month that's immigrating to our country. So that's what's keeping things up. And so I think in this environment, I don't know. Like I've been tracking this June, because people are anticipating, are they going to drop rates in June? It's looking less and less. So like I think it's around 50% or something like that right now. I'm not sure. I have to look it up, but yeah, I think we'll have a small drop this summer, but 2% in that amount of time, I think it's going to be not much.
Okay. Gentlemen, if we don't have anything in it to add, does anyone want to add anything else? I think we're good then. Yeah. Guys and folks thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. And guys, thanks for being part of this too.
How do I turn this on? Oh, here.
Stop recording.